lengthy. It takes up to 18 months to 2 years after sponsorship for resettlement. It also cannot take everyone who applies. The option the government advocates is for refugees, those who are denied resettlement in USA, to be resettled in Port Moresby in PNG. This is completely irresponsible. PNG is a dangerous country. It has its own internal problems and high unemployment. We need a safe third country for resettlement. New Zealand is the obvious solution with its long-standing offer, yet the government still refuses. Australia has imprisoned us. It is Australia's responsibility to provide us with security and safety resettlement. It is Australia's responsibility to honour the UN Refugee Convention. We need our freedom. We are still fighting and demanding justice. Thanks to everyone who is standing alongside us in the name of solidarity and humanity. It gives us strength to know we have your support. We do not know how to thank you for your unconditional support and love. And in the other hand, we do not have anything other than our warm tears.
Speaking.
Thank you, Ruby, and well done on everybody to come here and stand up for the Medevac law. Now, as a doctor and then as a parliamentarian, this was an issue that was urgent, it was a humanitarian crisis, it needed a solution. And in an extraordinary outbreak of parliamentary cooperation, we had the opposition crossbenchers in both the Senate and in the House of Representatives pass this important law by just one vote in each house. But what that meant was that people who were sick, who could not get the treatment that they needed on Manus Island or Nauru, because of bureaucratic delay and intervention, were able to get the health care that they needed. Doctors were calling for this, nurses were calling for this, social workers were calling for this, lawyers were calling for this. Australians from all across our country were calling for justice, for health care, for people who needed that health care. Medevac saves lives. It continues to save lives, but it is currently under very great threat. Medevac is under threat because the government has put repeal legislation through the House of Representatives, and they will be presenting it to the Senate probably in this next sitting. And it will most likely come down to just one vote by one senator as to whether we can continue to save lives. I urge every Australian to get behind saving the Medevac law, because without this law we go back to the old way where bureaucrats were making the decisions about healthcare and about medical transfers and not doctors and healthcare professionals. We must save Medevac so we can continue to save lives. Congratulations to everybody in the sector who is working so hard on behalf of people seeking asylum who are in offshore detention. We have to work out a way of ending indefinite offshore detention. We must save Medicare so we can continue to save lives, so that the care decisions about people who are currently in offshore detention, going into their 7th year of this cruel policy, can get the health care that they need here in Australia. Thank you all for coming today, and congratulations to everybody who is working so hard on behalf of this massive humanitarian issue. Thank you.
Not a doctor. I'd like to start by acknowledging that the land we're on today is Gadigal land, and thank Faith for that beautiful acknowledgement of country. An extraordinary history. It's a privilege to live on a continent that was cared for with such foresight and such a comprehensively engaged culture with our continent. If you think about what's happening today, about those appalling fires, and caused by our culture, by our land clearing, our forestry, our disregard for the climate, all of us, I'm sure, feel a deep sympathy for those communities that are under threat at the moment and have seen the fires devastate them. But I think we need to take a collective responsibility for some of what's happening today and get our political system to step up. And we should learn from First Nations peoples in all the work that we do. So I acknowledge this as Gadigal land. In what's been decades and decades of brutal laws, one after the other, brutal laws designed to make refugees the other, to make them an enemy of Australia, to victimise them and isolate refugees. Decades of brutal laws by both Labor and the Coalition, but most recently a brutal series of laws by the Coalition. The Federal Parliament has passed one decent law, one little slither of decency, and that was the Medevac laws. And those laws are under threat, and I acknowledge Kerryn and the work that she did and the campaigning that she did before she got into Parliament. Thank you, Kerryn, for the work you did. But I acknowledge also those millions and millions of Australians of decency who wanted a federal parliament to pass one decent act about refugees, to put a tiny little bit of humanity into a grossly brutal system, and they did eventually. And don't kid yourself, Parliament didn't do it by itself, and parliamentarians didn't do this because they wanted to be nice. The only reason the Federal Parliament, a majority of MPs, did it was because of an extraordinary community campaign from decent Australians who are the majority of this country and who want our Parliament to do more of that, not less of that. And that's what we're saying today. More of that, not less of that. Justice for refugees, not brutality, and close the camps. That's what we want. So as a Greens MP, I continue to make a commitment on behalf of my colleagues at a local, state and a federal level. Every day, whenever the issue comes forward, we will always vote for our international obligations and always vote for decencies and always vote to free refugees and never vote to imprisonment. That is a commitment. But we need a majority of MPs to do that. We need Labor to stay strong on this one issue of Medevac. We need a majority in the Senate to hold together and to maintain these Medevac laws, because in the time they've been in place, 140 refugees facing life-threatening illnesses. And we heard earlier that they can be as simple as an infection, untreated infection, heart conditions. And we know, because of the brutal way in which we jail refugees as a country, too often psychological trauma on psychological trauma, both the trauma that a refugee comes to Australia with, but then amplified by the indefinite detention and the brutality of the system. And we know that those traumas and those illnesses untreated can see refugees die because it's happened. And no bureaucrat should be deciding whether or not a refugee is in need of urgent medical treatment. That's why we have the Medevac laws in place. And with those 140 refugees who have had the benefit of Medevac and the benefit of the medical treatment, we know for a fact that lives have been saved. And we know for a fact that if the Senate repeals these laws, people will die. People who came to us seeking for our protection, seeking for our care, in a world that's increasingly trouble-torn, have come to us looking for help, and we treat them as criminals, and this government doesn't even want to give them medical care. We can't allow that to happen. Thank you for coming together today. Commit in the next fortnight, 3 weeks, 4 weeks while the Federal Parliament sits. Commit to do what you can in your daily work. Talk to your colleagues, talk to your neighbours, communicate directly with federal parliamentarians and maintain the rage, because we should be angry. We should be angry about the brutality of the way we treat refugees. We should be angry every day a prison camp is opened and imprisoning people who haven't committed a crime. And we should be angry that this federal parliament, under the appalling leadership of the likes of Dutton and Morrison, will tear down this one act of decency. Thank you for coming out today. Thank you very much.
Life or death. I'm Carolina Gotardo. I am the co-convener of the Catholic Alliance for People Seeking Asylum and the director of the Jesuit Refugee Service, where we supported directly more than 3,000 refugees and people seeking asylum here in Western Sydney. And I literally just came back from Papua New Guinea a few days ago, where we were part of a Catholic delegation to stand with the men on the ground and to see what was the situation there. And I can tell you that the situation is dire. The situation in terms of health, both physical and mental, is extremely serious. And as Kerryn was saying before, it is a humanitarian crisis and it's a matter of life or death. Unfortunately, so many of the men are waiting for the medical transfer, and some of them were describing how the painkillers that they have been living on for such a long time, that where their conditions were actually caused by the detention, are not doing anything for them, and the conditions are actually getting worse and worse. There are many men on sedatives and with very, very serious risk and suicide ideation. It is a crisis. What was interesting as well was seeing the sense of solidarity between the men, and how so many of them were more focused about not so much themselves, but the other men that were in Bomana. And the situation in Bomana is almost impossible to describe. We have a situation of detention that the men describe as physical and psychological torture. So the equivalent of 1 meal per day, no pillows for sleeping, no contact at all with the families for more than 3 months. Some people were losing more than 13, 15 kilos in this short period of time. No access to legal advice, no access to any sort of outside air. Really a very, very serious condition, and that constant threat about signing those papers of return as the only way out of Bomana. And this is completely unacceptable. This shouldn't be happening. These men have already been suffering for 7 years. Bomana should be a no-no, and we should all stand against that situation. The other thing that the men said was they very much remember their fellow friends and brothers, because they really see each other as brothers, that have died. So for instance, Dr. Rohani, that as we know, committed suicide in Brisbane after he came to Australia. And this also highlights the situation of what happens with the men when they come here. And it's the situation that in an organization like Jesuit Refugee Service we see all the time. Families, and the issue of families was also harrowing. So I saw so many men show me the pictures of their family with a mixture of proud and despair and sadness, understanding that they haven't seen their sons or daughters grow up, and that they have been away from them for 7 years or so, and don't know when will they ever see them, or if they will ever see them again. And others were saying that they are not in contact with their families for a while because their families no longer believe them, that they have done nothing to be in the conditions that they are. And this is the level of despair. Plus some others that are living in Papua New Guinea with new families and now have to decide whether they leave their families there to go for resettlement, or whether because they cannot travel together with their families. So all in all, absolutely incredibly harrowing. One of the quotes that really struck me from the man is that he said, "We all have stories, and each story that we have is a tragedy, and every tragedy is different." And we just heard that the only thing they have left is the tears. This is something that they left in such a strong issue. Just to finish, I wanted to finish looking at a bit on the uplifting side of it, and it's just the sense of resilience of these men and the sense of brotherhood in between them. As I was saying, most of them are more worried about the other men that are in these appalling conditions than anything, and are asking us, all of us, to do something about it, to do something to stop this situation. The other thing they say many times was how much they felt the presence of the people in Australia that have been in their struggle with them, and how much this has made a difference to them. And I found it very inspiring and uplifting to hear this, and to even see that some of these men still speak after what they have been going through during this time. The sense of cruelty is almost I cannot make enough justice to what I saw. Nothing that what I say is enough to show the urgency and the level of despair and the level of unfairness and cruelty of this situation that we witnessed. What I saw, I cannot unsee, and what I heard, I cannot. What I have heard, I cannot unhear. So I think that for us, all of this should turn really in a sense of action, in a sense of urge to do something about it, to save that bill that Kerryn and so many of us worked so hard to put through, and to make sure that this matter of life and death continues being a matter of saving lives, and doctors taking decisions rather than politicians that are not able to take these decisions. We should go for this, and we should also campaign for the imminent closure of Bomana. Bomana should not be there. No one should be in Bomana. Men that have been suffering for so many years shouldn't be in conditions of torture like they are. We should stand for that, and we should stand for the refugees and the people that are in Port Moresby to be able to rebuild their lives after enduring cruelty, torture, and suffering for more than 7 years. Thank you so much, and it's just a privilege to be able to speak to you.
That existed before Medevac, and the problems that we're going to have if this government succeeds in having the Medevac Bill or law revoked. I want to tell you about a 10-year-old boy, and the government normally hides these cases behind privacy that this child went through. I want to say also that I'm going to discuss some very serious and traumatic matters, and I'm giving you a trigger warning that if issues of child self-harm and suicide, a boy and his mother were on Nauru, and they were separated from the boy's father by the Australian government. And beginning in late 2013, when the boy was 5 years old,